Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. This is Shaping the Headlines, Communications Outreach and Response. My name is Alana LaFleur. I'm a Communications Manager here at the NAIC.
And I'm Dean Davison, founder of Davison Strategic Communications, based here in Kansas City.
So here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about bridging the gap. How can you close the divide between your departments and local news outlets? You can do that by creating proactive relationships. And how can you stay ahead of the storm? How can you help consumers get the information they need and become a trusted source as a Department of Insurance? And how can you craft credible holding statements should a crisis arrive or a bad day come?
So in the before times, in the olden days, 10 years ago or so, if you had the New York Times on the phone and 60 Minutes in your lobby, you knew that it was going to be a bad day. Today, in the Today Times, and if you'll go ahead and switch it forward, it can be some relatively random person who's got a following and an axe to grind with you or your organization. So it's trickier times. I mean, no big surprise there. You know, everybody is currently, sentient and above ground here today. So you know that this is going on. But this is the kind of stuff that I deal with on a regular basis. I've been doing this sort of work for the last 30 years. I actually started my career in the television news business, was a reporter in Green Bay, Wisconsin, of all places, and then moved to Kansas City, was with the CBS affiliate here, and then was with two big insurance organizations through the years. One being GE Insurance Solutions, or Employers Reinsurance Corporation, and then with Lockton, a large global broker. And I've been doing this work on my own for a long time. So Alana and I actually share some interesting background together.
I was also in news. I was a TV news reporter in Central New York, Eastern Tennessee, and then here in Kansas City at Fox 4 most recently, before I came to the NAIC. So I've seen both sides of how things work, and I know a lot of you who are PIOs were also in news at one point.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least a few former journalists in the room, I know, because why don't we go ahead and flip the screen? The reality is lots of reporters are leaving the business because there's about 25% fewer jobs in local news today than there were just a few years ago. It wiped out 3,200 newspapers in the past decade or so. And anybody who works in the state capitol, as a lot of you do, know that the number of State House reporters has declined dramatically. About a third of those folks have left or been canceled over the last 10 or 11 years. So it's a tough job to try to bridge the gap. And that's what we're going to try to talk to you about today. Why don't I take, there you go. We're going to talk about bridging the gap here. How do you make the right kind of connections so that you can be successful in trying to tell the stories that you want to tell in your organization? There's some fundamental principles that I like to use, and I think this bears out with anybody who I know who has worked in your field for a long time. Number one, connecting directly is really critical. Having a personal relationship with reporters is vital. Texting is nice, social media is fine, and a vital part of what we do, as we heard from Warren earlier, but you got to know people face to face, at least by the telephone. I mean, there just is no substitute, especially with a reporter, and especially when the issue is difficult and sensitive. Local media want explainers. Refrigerator journalism is what we used to call this a long time ago, the kind of thing that you'd clip out of the newspaper and put up on the refrigerator at home. So consumer-oriented information and explainers about how insurance works can be very beneficial to you establishing a relationship as a resource. Being accessible, not hiding behind the walls of the building, being there to answer questions, whether it's an easy question or sometimes if it's a tense situation or a difficult situation, being willing to take that on. And then also tying it back to stories, talking about real people and how this affects their lives.
Pass the torch. Here is proof that I was a reporter at one time. The top is me being very cold outside the Nelson Atkins Museum here in Kansas City, and then they let me inside as I braced for the cold in the warmth. So to cultivate those proactive relationships with reporters, you need to understand a little bit about how the newsroom works, right? So reporters spend a lot of time outside of their 8 to 6 or whichever shift that they're working, a lot of time trying to find information, find stories, and build sources. So they get to work in the morning or the afternoon, whatever their shift is, day show or night show, and they sit around a big table for the editorial meeting. So it's going to be producers, other reporters, anchors, newsroom management. And when I was in Central New York reporting, my news director would literally start the meeting off by saying, okay, what are people talking about today? And what people are talking about, pending breaking news that can send everything in a total different direction. That's what's going to be covered. That's what's going to be online. That's what's going to be in print. That's what's going to be on broadcast when 5 o'clock comes around. Sometimes 4 o'clock. A lot of places are doing 4 o'clock news as well. So that's even less time to get the story and the message out. So another question that is always asked in newsrooms, okay, you have a story. Who cares? Why does it matter? Why is it important? If it's one guy complaining about something that's only on his street, that's only affecting him, it's less likely to get coverage. And another thing as far as who cares, we always looked at, okay, what's the money angle and what's the safety angle? Because people care about money and they care about safety. And then who are our voices? That's another question that we look at. So you want the character, as Dean said, you want that real story, that emotional connection that's going to really appeal to the viewer. But that can't be the only voice in the story. We need facts, we need context to give it weight. So who can be a second voice? Well, if it's a story that involves insurance, DOIs are great resources for that second voice. And when it comes to weather, stations will do wall-to-wall coverage, which means from 5 o'clock to 7 when they go off air. It's going to be all weather, meteorologists every 5 minutes, and in between that, stories relating to weather, for example. So when that happens, you're covering hours of weather. You need different angles to it. It can't just be like, it's cold, brr. What are the other options that we can do? Well, what if something really bad does happen because of the weather? What if your roof collapses under ice and snow? Then that's when you guys can think, well, what's the role of insurance in this? How can we, as regulators and PIOs, how can we help consumers with that and help reporters fill the air and then in turn, get that knowledge over to the consumer? So reporters love to build relationships, right? I told you they spend so much time outside of their shift preparing for the pitch story. And I'll be very honest with you, that was the most stressful part of the job was like, I'm like, every day I have to come in with 3 or 4 good ideas. I'm like, oh my God, it's like too much. So there's a lot of time spent and there's not a lot of time to waste because 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock is gonna come no matter what. So there were people that I would go to. There's one lawyer in particular that I can think of in Kansas City that I did a story with about something. And then for another story that needed that legal context, I'd be like, hey, can you do me the story? Because people don't have time to spend looking for a different voice for every story. And if you are that factual source of information, you're the Department of Insurance, you know the knowledge, you have what they need, you can be a regular to them. Another newsroom that I was in, one reporter started saying, well, my sources say in the pitch meeting, and then everyone had little bug antennas like, what about my sources? Like, I have sources too, so they want to be recognized as leaders in the newsroom. So if you become their source, their factual source of information, the authority, the context to whatever story they're telling, that's a great thing that can benefit everyone. Okay, are you a good pitch or are you a bad pitch? So when I first started reporting, we were on the Kansas side, and I made a Wizard of Oz reference, and my photographer said, he's like, you get one of those, that is it, like you can only make one reference. So this is my second reference, and I will not make any more. But so you can see, I'm gonna use the pointer, this top, does that work? The top reference was a news release, and don't try to read it, it's really small. Just aesthetically, not appealing to the eye, it's too much. This, I think, went into a news station in either Tampa or Nashville. And then the bottom one is like too short, it doesn't say any information. It's just not enough for anyone to be compelled to cover whatever they're talking about. So what's in a good pitch? How can you make it visually appealing and more likely to get covered and picked up by that news outlet? You can lead with the lead. Start with the most important thing up top. Newsrooms are busy. They don't have time to read through a huge block of text. Tell them what's important and tell them up front. And in that, tell them, answer that question. Well, why should I care? What's in it for me? Right? So lead with, mitigation program helps thousands of Missouri consumers save money on their premiums, or whatever the case may be, right? So it's top line. They're like, oh, wait, people love saving money. They're going to be more safe. Top line, don't make them dig Don't make it too long, don't make it too short. Have that happy medium of information. And show me, right? Don't tell them, show them. Is there a visual that you can provide that goes along with the story? If it's broadcast, they're not going to cover it because that's another conversation that they have in those editorial meetings. They're like, okay, that sounds cool, but what are we gonna look at? What are people gonna look at? This is a visual medium. So when you send those pitches, which a pitch is a bid for attention, like cover me, we're doing this, give us attention, tell our story, think about breaking it down into visual elements. So bullets, bolding, because reporters in newsroom, people, they think of things in terms of the 5 W's and how. So if you structure your pitch, your email to them in that format, that's going to be supporting the way that they think, and it's also just visually like easier to scan. And numbers in context, right? So a number might sound appealing to someone. So for example, when I was reporting in Tennessee, someone was calling in and saying like, oh my gosh, 500 teachers are out sick in like this school district, like it's the flu season. And we're like, okay, well, how many teachers work in the school district, right? Are there like 10,000? Are there only 500? What's the average of teachers out every single day, any time of year? Has that number gone up? Has it gone down? What are the patterns? So if you're going to do numbers that might sound really appealing to people, make sure you have context to provide as well to make them more significant. So this is a release, it's a good release out of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office, but it's a lot of bulky text. So what I did, just made it more visual, right? Top line thing, the law that took effect does X, Y, Z. Here's the data compared to before and after. Here's the video opportunity. Make it bold. We have footage of a chase that led to an arrest and a conviction in this case. So you can I'll toggle back and forth so you can kind of see the difference. I think this one is a lot easier to read, a lot easier to digest. And remember, those newsrooms are busy, people are scanning, like we don't have a lot of time. This might lead to more coverage because it's easier to digest, whereas this might be a little overwhelming because you have to spend time reading it and digging through it. All right, so getting ahead of the storms. How can you position yourself as a trusted resource for consumers ahead of time? Part of how you can do that is by leveraging those positive relationships that you've built with members of the media. So more coverage could lead to more consumer awareness. Consumers are aware of you, they know how you can help and support them, and then they trust you. They know that you're the go-to source. So here's, again, more proof that I'm a reporter. I was one. So the top right, that was in Tennessee. There was a storm that went through, destroyed a farmer's market. You see the tents, people's items, livelihoods were destroyed. The one next to it, the left, there was unfortunately a deadly tornado in Missouri. And then the bottom, and this is where pitching comes in, I'm outside shoveling snow in a beanie. That pitch came to us. This is wall-to-wall coverage, right, ahead of a snowstorm. So the pitch that we based that story on, one of the health systems out here has a really good cardiac program, like state-of-the-art, everything new, top rated. So they're like, hey, you know, snow's coming. If you don't have a snowblower, which a lot of people don't, and you're shoveling, you have certain risks, you're a certain age, you might have a predisposition. That's a big cardiac arrest risk. So we're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. We're doing wall to wall. That's one of the angles, and that was my story for the day. And then the bottom one was not live. Everything else was a live shot, but the bottom one was something we pre-recorded, and it was just me getting pelted in the face with snow. So if you can give reporters during weather an inside story where they don't have to struggle like I was, like they're gonna love you, and that's gonna be a really good way to bridge the gap.
Bottom line is more fun.
Being outside?
It's fun for us watching.
It's not fun for us out there. So how do you continue to get ahead of the storm? Develop messages ahead of time. Figure out your narrative because you control the narrative. The person asking the questions doesn't. The news station doesn't control the narrative. You have your message that you want out. So develop messages for all layers, right? Mitigation, preparedness, recovery. And this is not just for weather, right? You're helpful and a resource outside of weather. So think about things that are timely that you can support. September is Life Insurance Awareness Month, right? So how can people prepare to be a beneficiary? What do they need to know when they're looking for that life insurance policy? What do they need to know when they're filing a claim when it comes to health insurance? What should they do if they suspect fraud from their insurer? So develop messages for all of those things, different layers of it, if that consumer has that information, again, you're building trust and confidence. And the NAIC can support you with that messaging if you are a regulator and a PIO. So this is NAIC Connect. This is kind of like a social media hub for regulators. So we have information on there for engaging with media, engaging with policyholders, the public, consumers, for all different things. And you can see the little box on there with my little headshot next to it. So this is a live feed on the PIO Resource Center. And you can just like post in there, hey, like, has anybody gotten this reporter inquiry, or has anyone put out materials for Cybersecurity Awareness Month that's coming up in October? So you can talk to each other and comment and like each other's posts, and it's fun. You can share the information. And then this is just a little bit of what we have, consumer guides that are available on our websites, but are easier for you to find here and track down. Consumer insights, high-level overviews of niche topics in insurance, and then more consumer messaging and toolkit opportunities. And here's some of what you can share with consumers ahead of time, ahead of a storm, ahead of anything that happens, so you develop that trust as a go-to resource. So we have the post-disaster claims guide, which has a number of different perils, what you need to do, what consumers should do when they experience those and need to file a claim. We have our Go Bag tool, which is a cute little interactive tool online that has a little bag, and you're putting like the cash into it. You're putting things that you need if you need to get up and go in a disaster. And then we have the NAIC Home Inventory app. It's a free app that at the end of the day could make claims easier and faster for consumers if they just have that log of everything that they own, everything in their home, and you can take pictures and videos in it too. And then here's another example of some of the consumer insights we have. Those are articles on our website, kind of one-pager, high-level overviews of a specific topic. If there is a storm, a severe weather event, fraud is a risk. That's when people will take advantage of people who are experiencing probably some of the worst times of their life. How can you avoid that? What should consumers know? And the after, what should I do after a wildfire? We've experienced this devastating loss. What's next? How can our DOI help us? So that's all information that the NAIC has to support your messaging.
So in corporate life, we would call sharing this sort of information leveraging best practices, right? But what the message is, really steal this stuff. You've got great stuff on the NAIC Connect website. Steal it, use it. There is no reason for you to have to recreate the wheel, reinvent the wheel here. And the same holds for the stories I'm going to share with you here. These are great examples that are going to hit home for many of you, and hopefully you'll take away something that's of value from it, from what the teams in Colorado, Maryland, and Wisconsin have done. And so Delaney Trail and the rest of the team at the department in Colorado has done a great job through the years of establishing substantive relationships with a handful of key influential media outlets, in particular the Denver Post, the Colorado Public Radio, NPR, and then the Colorado Sun. And there's others as well. But they've had a situation where they've been able to call on those relationships and make it count here over the past several weeks. So I'm sure you've heard about this, the fact that the tax credits on healthcare premiums are going to disappear very shortly. And the state of Colorado and the department was working on their report, anticipating what was going to be happening in the individual market. One of the good things that they do, many other states I believe do this, but they do an annual report ahead of what the renewal season is going to be in the individual and small group market. What kind of premium increases or declines can you expect? So they previewed this report with several of their key media outlets, had a in-depth conversation with them. In fact, in some cases, the commissioner was face-to-face with them, background briefing, embargoed until the report was released. But it gave the reporters a chance to understand what was going on in the market, because Colorado's going to see 25 to 40% increases in the individual market. This is going to be sticker shock for consumers. Also gave them a chance to talk a little bit and remind them how insurance works, how the individual and small group healthcare insurance market works. So then the DOI issues the report. It's a bit of a bombshell. And ultimately, the governor calls a special session of the legislature to advance legislation on this and some other issues to try to address the consumer cost crisis that they're facing. That obviously led to ongoing media engagement, more than a little bit. The folks who they had briefed obviously had better stories, but those are the media outlets like the Post and the Sun and others that are kind of setting the agenda, the news agenda for others in the state anyway. So headlines, big bold headlines here, their key messages landed. Bottom line is it generated momentum and it helped get the legislature to act. And ultimately here, 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they passed legislation that will help with a fund to help lower those insurance premiums. They've got a fund of about $100 million. Not going to solve the problem, doesn't solve all of the issue, but it's an important step forward. And the headlines look pretty good, and the insurance department looks like they're on their game. So kudos to them. Some lessons from this. Number one is build trust in advance. You can't do all of this in 2 weeks. In advance of you can't have your first time, hey, I'd like to talk to you about health insurance premiums when all heck is about to break loose. You've got to have that relationship before the bad stuff hits the fan. You're going to have to engage, in many cases, your commissioner or other leaders who can be substantive people to answer really tough questions. Facts matter. Having this report that just kind of laid out the facts of the situation was really, really valuable. It wasn't, well, we think insurance premiums are going to go up. Show me. Back to the state of Missouri theme. And then be able to explain insurance clearly and simply. One thing that I think Delaney shared with us was that, and this is an important bit of information for anybody working in media relations and so forth, is you got to be able to push back. Sometimes folks in the process, especially when you have a partisan issue, are going to want to say things or write the headline in a way that maybe isn't exactly what the facts might support, might want to push the envelope a little bit, and being willing to push back and say, hey, it's not exactly what this all means. And so, again, trying to get people back to the center of the road in terms of sharing the facts and being credible.
So then we have some examples from Maryland, how they leverage media relationship to build to build themselves as a trusted resource for consumers. So last year, they developed the HCAT system, right? The Health Coverage Assistance Team. So the purpose of HCAT is to help consumers navigate challenges that affect their access to care. So it's a walking through process, right? The team is there to help consumers navigate every step of health coverage. So, okay, I need insurance. Okay, I have a policy. What does it do? So it's just taking them on the journey of that process. And the team allows them to better advocate for consumers. It doesn't overlap with other state resources. It's become really streamlined so that consumers can get the answers and the help that they need. And they work a lot with mental health is a big part of that, helping consumers get access to mental health care. So here's an example of some of the work. I think this newsletter looks really good. It's colorful. My eyes are like, oh my God, this is so fun to look at. They do a lot of social media, a lot of videos, a lot of explainers, which we talked about earlier, that are helpful to people who don't really have a background. You hear all the time, I don't know how insurance works, what? So this can help answer those questions. They have support in Spanish for consumers. They do a lot of community outreach that's going to hundreds of events every year, some big, big community events, some little, farmers markets, just to really connect with those consumers. And this beautiful newsletter that you see, this is going out to about 50,000 consumers, and it has a very high open rate, which is very important. You want people to open it and get that information. So something that Maryland did to secure coverage is they rolled this program out to specific reporters ahead of time to get that word out there so that people could use this. And so what that did is it built the DOI as a trusted resource for the news teams and for the consumers who would use HCAT, right? So maybe they're doing a story, a reporter's doing a story 6 months down the line about something related to health coverage and care. Even if they don't talk to the Maryland Insurance Administration, they can still put in their story or mention it in a tag. Hey, there's this program, HCAT, they can help you if you're having problems. And that's more awareness for the consumer. So what did they learn from this? So we talked about starting with the most important thing, lead with the lead. They learned to use free in bold letters. We're talking about money. People love free things. So my eyes go straight to free help. People like things that are free even if they don't really need them. So this is a great flyer that they put out. They used plain language, which we learned about from Brenda earlier today, if you went to her great session. And they really leveraged community partners. So the University of Maryland has a health center, and they partnered with them. So this flyer that you see, those flyers are distributed through the University of Maryland and that health center that they have. So it's really getting the word out to people. So they learned to leverage those partnerships. They learned to go where the people are, right? They're at the community fairs. And again, going back to the point, they've really learned how to walk with the consumer until there is a resolution. And they have fun while they're doing it. But so even if they couldn't help a consumer with an issue where it's like you need to go to your insurer for that specifically because that will be the solution to it, they're still able to walk them through that process.
So the state of Wisconsin has been doing some really interesting work around risk mitigation and building resilience. This actually flows from some NAIC work that many of you may be familiar with over the past few years to try to strengthen communities. And it's called Stronger Wisconsin. And the team there, Sarah Smith, who may be online with us today, not sure if she was going to be able to make it, she had to suffer and go to Lake Geneva for another meeting this week, so she couldn't come to Kansas City in the heat. So let's all just have a moment of support for Sarah that she had to suffer. Anyway, the point here is that it's about mitigating risks, collaboration across multiple state agencies like the Department of Natural Resources and others, and then ultimately protecting people and communities. So I lived in Wisconsin. My first job in TV news was in Green Bay. And so when I thought about mitigating risks, I assumed, okay, flood and tornadoes, covered tornadoes in Wisconsin. What I hadn't thought about, and what most people in Wisconsin really hadn't thought about, was the biggest risk that they have, which is wildfire. If you've been to the North Woods of Wisconsin, you go, oh, that makes sense. But they have huge issues around wildfires in Wisconsin, one of the biggest risks that they have in the state. So here's what they did. One of the key things that they were doing to try to get the word out about these different innovations in resilience was doing a cabinet secretary tour to different locations around the state. So what they were trying to do was showcase innovations like mass timber buildings, some new roofing technologies to have more secure roofs so you had less damage, and then flood mitigation projects. One of the challenges they have in Wisconsin is that rivers freeze and then they thaw. And when they thaw, bad things happen because the streams and rivers get clogged, ice flows get backed up on bridges, damage bridges, and flood neighborhoods. And so Sarah and the team did a really good job when they were getting their cabinet secretaries and other public officials out. They were trying to connect to real people who were impacted by this or who were taking on the challenge of risk mitigation. They did some great work up in Door County, Wisconsin. Those of you who know Wisconsin, it's the thumb of the state. It's a peninsula. And so there's some really innovative architecture work that's going on up there. They included a lady whose home had flooded in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. So trying to tell the real stories of real people and not just have a bunch of highfalutin, even though they may be elected or senior appointed cabinet secretaries, not just having the public officials talking. So the lessons here from them. Number one, remembering when you're talking to a newsroom, why should I care? Who cares and why should I care about your story? The fact that there are 4 cabinet secretaries coming to Fond du Lac today, help me out. But, you're there to showcase this project that's going to reduce and deal with the flooding problem. And remember that flood that we had 18 months ago? And you've got this great drone video of the river all backed up? Yeah, we got a hook now. Have clear messages, and they do. tell stories with real people that I've just mentioned. And here's the thing that she cautioned us about. She said, we have great messages. Our director, our commissioner, can walk through all 10 of those messages lickety-split, has them down pat. Unfortunately, sometimes they had one particular story. They thought this was going to be a great story. Reporter had followed them all day. Story never appeared. And what they figured out later was that they had been so good and so tight and not robotic, but had repeated their messages so many times that the reporter kind of felt like they were not there to do a TV commercial, that they were not there to do a commercial for the Department of Insurance. So don't over-prepare.
All right, so now we're going to talk to you about how to craft those crisis holding statements to prepare for those bad days. Maybe there's a salacious headline about your department, right? None of us want it. It's unfortunately going to happen. But when you're prepared with the holding statements, you don't have to get ready, right? You have those structures, that framework in place, and then you can spend more time focusing on getting the message across that you want to get across.
So, did I lose my mind? Oh, here we are. I'm still here. So I'm going to start briefly with 4 core principles. Sorry, 6. I can count. Actually, I can't. I'm a words guy. I'm not a math guy. 6 core principles that I think are important and that my clients through the years have found are important to build a crisis response approach. You may agree or disagree, but have some principles and get everybody around the table to agree on what your principles are going to be. Number 1, tell the truth. Seems quaint, seems trite, seems maybe even old-fashioned these days, but somebody told me a long time ago that always tell the truth. It's easier to remember what you told people. Understand your role. In a crisis situation, there are 3 hats that you can wear, and you can usually only wear 1 hat at a time. You can be the victim, the person, the organization, the group who's been hurt. You can be the villain. That's the bad guy. That's the guy with the black hat. Or you can be the hero, the problem solver, the organization that's trying to solve it. And you usually can't move from one to another. You just need to understand. And when you're the villain and you realize, oh, I'm the bad guy, figure out how do you get out of here as fast as possible. Take your beating and move on. Make goodwill deposits. This gets back to bridging the gap and making sure that you have relationships with reporters and others in the community, the public, before you need them. Because when you're in trouble, that's not the time to, oh, don't you all love me? No, we don't. Not today, thank you. But we know that you will try to do the right thing. Tell it all, tell it now. This is important advice, but you'll also see there's an asterisk beside it. When you've got a bad story, get the news out, deal with it, address it, tell people what you're going to do to address it. Now, sometimes you can pour gasoline on your own fire and make things worse. I've had more than a couple of situations. I'll tell you about one, leaving names and other descriptors out. But we had an executive who was getting fired. He had done bad things. We thought there was going to be news about it, that it would circulate into the media. It wasn't going to be a national story, but it was going to be a story. We were all prepared. We had our statement. We had our internal announcement. Got to do the internal announcement. We had a Q&A. We had the lawyers ready to go if we needed to file suit against, somebody behaving badly. We take the action. Nothing happens. There's no story. He decides to go quietly. So we have all this work. We've worked for 3 days, multiple hours to get all this stuff ready, but we didn't have to put it out. That's happened to me more than once. So it's important to tell it all, tell it now, but not until you have to. Share internally. Remember your internal audience. Remember your own employees when things are going sideways. They want to know, and don't just keep it at the executive level. If there's stories appearing, make sure that people internally know what's going on. And then I think everybody here gets this because in state government, you've got to connect and collaborate. I mean, the director of insurance, the commissioner of insurance is not going to make some radical announcement, some big announcement that's going to surprise the governor, right? That's a career limiting move is what you call that in corporate life.
All right, so the crisis holding statements that we've prepared for you on how to frame them and how to craft them using templates. So we have a cyber event, we have a major loss, and then we have rage bait. So salacious headline, we have an internet troll going off. And then we have some NAIC resources for these, which I will tell you about as we go through it.
So the detailed material here is in your app, and we've got documents in there that again, we want you to steal. We created it so that you could steal this stuff. So leverage best practices when you're telling your boss what you're doing there. But for holding statements, here's an approach that I found is very helpful for organizations. That a holding statement isn't just what do we say, it's also what are we doing. So I'm going to give these to you in two pieces. What do you do and what do you say? Let's talk about cyber first. And obviously, every situation is going to be nuanced and different, but in terms of preparation and then what happens whenever a cyber event happens. First of all, you and your friends in IT and security are going to be looking for points of vulnerability. You're going to be doing phishing tests and executive impersonation events to test what's going on. That's not the communications team's job. That's operations, that's security. But you ought to know what's going on. You need to be connected, especially if you're the chief public information officer. Establishing clear policies, communicating them clearly, and then when the bad thing happens, and by the way, if you haven't had a cyber event in your organization yet, just wait. It's happening. It's going to happen. Because it just does. I mean, there are so many attacks. Anyway, but don't wait until, oh, we have had an intrusion or we've got a denial of service to decide who's going to be on your crisis team. You got to know who's going to be there because there's going to be people who are going to want to be in the room and there's going to be people who don't want to be in the room. And you want the right people in the room and the people who don't need to be there right then and right now to not be there. Prepare your messages. Know what your framework is, and we'll go to that in just a moment.
I'm going to cut you off, Dean, talking about preparing the messages. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and when a cyber event happens, everyone's worried about, like, oh my gosh, my identity, like my livelihood, my life. So we have an NAIC Consumer Insight about how to protect your identity online that has steps, what to check for, and that's a timely opportunity to put that out. You can put it out any time of the year, but also a timely opportunity to go to the news and say, hey, we have this resource for you, or we'll be happy to talk to people about on camera about what they can do if this happens.
Right, and also to avoid fingerprinting or finger pointing, avoid that by clarifying what the third-party responsibilities. Almost every organization has third-party software vendors and database providers, and you need to know what everybody's role in this game might be. So, your holding statement. And there's, over time, when you have a cyber event, there's probably going to be a series of 2 or 3 events or 2 or 3 messages that come out over time. But it's pretty simple. What happened? Just explain what happened in the simplest possible terms, in human, ordinary English. Don't let, I'm sure we probably have an IT person or two. Please, don't take offense, but you got to use English. You have to use real words that people would understand. Explain the risks, what the impact to consumers or your insurance companies or other parties might be. Explain what you're doing right now to solve it. What have you done? What are you doing right now to fix the problem? If you need to apologize, and I know that makes attorneys get all shaky and weird, but this is why your relationship with your chief legal counsel is really important, because there's going to be a day when you need to say, we're sorry, we made a mistake. We have a problem. Here's what we're doing to fix it. You buy yourself so much more credibility when you just eat it and take the hit. Not always, but usually. And then later on you're going to need to explain future steps. Here's what we're going to do to make sure this never happens again. Okay, I'm going to flip through this one relatively quickly. This is about a major loss. Each of your states has a unique set of risks that you know are going to happen. Missouri, tornadoes, right? Floods. We know what's going to happen. Wildfires, well, and now wildfires in the South. So you know what's going to hit you, so you need to be prepared for those issues. So prepare your messages for each scenario in advance. Make sure you're well connected with your emergency management teams. More pressure than ever on states on that front now. This is where being a news junkie is going to be very helpful to you, because you're watching the news and you go, oh my gosh, we've got a wildfire in Mark Twain National Forest. Is this going to have an impact on people? Is it getting close to towns? What could the implications be? When it's and when you do have something that happens, get your leadership on the scene. Get leaders there. We saw from Warren earlier an example from, was that for the state of Washington?
Missouri.
Yeah. Oh, that was Missouri. That was a Missouri story. Anyway, get leadership on the team and try to identify how you can help people. How do you help people? As a secondary issue, try to help the media. Figure out, okay, how can you get to the right people? How can you get to our commissioner? But also, how can you get to the people from State Farm or Progressive or whoever are responsible for making things happen? And then, of course, you can highlight other resources.
I'll highlight some resources now. So on NAIC Connect, we have a bunch for you. The Post-Disaster Claims Guide, which is also on our website, you can access there. And then we also have a severe weather messaging resource that I just put out on Connect. And if you are not on it, you can email me after. I'll put my name up on the screen when we're done, and I can get you set up on Connect so you can download all those resources.
The message itself, as you'll see on the app, is pretty simple. Explain the tragedy. Here's what's going on. And then provide some facts, only facts. Use the facts that are coordinated with your emergency management teams. And then talk about the role of insurance. Here's what the responsibility of your insurance company is in this situation. And here's what the role of the Department of Insurance is to help ensure that consumers are treated fairly. This is your opportunity to shine. This is why you exist, to protect consumers in exactly this sort of situation. You can also, caution people about scams, and you want to avoid getting engaged in any issues around how's this going to affect the insurance market? How's this going to change prices for homeowners insurance in this market? All right, I want to take just a moment to talk about this one, rage bait. And I won't ask people to raise their hands to see if you've faced a rage bait moment when you have a particular reporter, a particular outlet, or a social media influencer who's decided that, oh, I want to go pick on this guy today or this organization today. Every situation is unique, duh. But here's why. Actually, the actions on this are probably more important than the messaging. I can help you more here than I can on the messaging. It's build goodwill. When you are transparent, when you're engaged in the community, when you're engaged with the public, and people know what you stand for and what you do, it's going to be harder for people to take shots at you. Now, every agency is not perfect, and no human beings are perfect. So you're going to have your moment. And when you do, I first advise most of my clients to engage affirmatively. Say, hey, what's going on? Tell me why this story is appearing the way it's appearing. If you have a chance, here's how insurance works. Here's how state regulation works. Here's what the limits are. Here's what we're authorized to do and what we can't do. Not making excuses, just saying, here's reality. Help bring them into your reality. When you do have in almost every reporter situation, you're going to interview the reporter before they get to interview your commissioner. You can say, so what's your story about? What's it about? You're going to go deeper when you think you've got a hostile.
Yeah, and you also want to know who else they're talking to for the story. What are the other voices? For context, for your records and for your knowledge, so this doesn't come out and you're like, "What? This is not what I thought it was." You talked to someone wild. Yeah.
And then, by all means, if you think you've got a difficult, sensitive situation, run mock interviews. Either do them yourself as the PIO, or if you got a really tough one, get somebody from the outside. You can get a political person. Sometimes they're helpful on this sort of stuff because they do deal with this a lot, or just somebody who's dispassionate about the whole thing. And then, you got to have your messages. Don't walk your executive into a situation where he or she is just going to start answering questions. You need to have your messages, not repeating them robotically, but reinforcing them, rephrasing them. Again, if you can, acknowledge errors or acknowledge, hey, here's some things we're trying to do to get better. And bridges. If you've got to have bridging statements. Here's what the key point is. So, let me explain how this works so that you aren't taking on a hypothetical and answering a hypothetical or reinforcing a negative question about, so for example, when did you stop beating your spouse? Don't prolong a fight. Tommy Lasorda, the famous manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers, used to say, don't pick a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel. Some of you are going, ink, barrel. Why would anybody care about ink, right? But don't pick a fight that you can't win and walk away. There's a certain point at which an interview or a situation just gets to be untenable, and you have to politely say, you know what? I think we've answered your questions. I appreciate your interest, but we're done. Thank you. Walk away. And the best media advice that I ever give people is the period is your best friend. Make your point and stop talking.
And then a few more things about addressing rage bait or unfavorable headlines. You don't have to acknowledge if there's like an article or a news story of some kind. You don't have to acknowledge the article. Definitely, you don't have to link it. We don't want to give more attention to something that isn't true. You can just say, this is the information. I don't know if you're familiar with the term like subtweet is when you kind of like talk about somebody but not to them and you don't at them. So you can essentially subtweet on whichever platform and say, this is what deductibles are and this is how premiums work, without calling out whatever that article was or whatever that news story was. So when it comes to issues in crisis management, as a regulator, as a PIO, as we wrap up, it's important to remember to consume the news, know what people are talking about. That's the top question that's going to be asked in those editorial meetings. And think about it in terms of, do we have a role? What can we do? How can we help consumers? How can we help consumers help themselves? Do we have information that we can give them to empower them and to advocate for them? And know where you can collaborate with your governor's office, other agencies, schools like Maryland did at the University of Maryland. So they're all things to keep top of mind as you go through this. And then to wrap everything up, build that goodwill, be proactive. Don't talk to reporters just when you need them. They love to have sources. They love to be leaders. You'll make it easier for them that they don't have to dig for 5 pitches a day if you give them 1 or 2 to work with. So just be engaged with that environment all the time. And human angles, people care about real people. That's going to make them emphasize with the story. They want to see that. They want to see themselves in the story. And if the DOI helped solve a problem, you're building yourself as a trusted resource. And just be prepared. Stay ready. Have those holding statements so you can get the message out that you need to get out and how you can help consumers.
We have just a minute left. Any feedback or thoughts? I do want to give Craig some acknowledgement here from Maryland, as well as Delaney. And so one of the things that Craig did and his team did, the University of Maryland has this health literacy program that they teach people how to talk about health issues and how to make the language really simple. University of Georgia might have some similar expertise that the State Commission can take advantage of in leveraging state-based resources. Any questions or feedback? Yo.
Hi, I have a question. So, do you all have any advice for DOIs that might be in bigger media markets? So, we're from Massachusetts, Boston. So, the pitch
Sure, that's a great point. How do you're in Massachusetts? How do you deal with media in Boston that has so many stories and so many opportunities? It's tough to get any attention whatsoever. I think the principles still hold. You need to figure out. You got to pick your spots. But consumer stuff, weather, just trying to break down the barriers is really important, and just figure out, okay, who do you think might be a friendly here in the newsroom? Maybe somebody knows somebody because they went to school with them or whatever. And every newsroom is basically the same. It's highly chaotic, often dysfunctional. And I say that with love and affection for news people. My oldest daughter is a reporter. But it's not the monolith that you think, well, everybody is highly organized and so forth. It's not. Everybody's there. It's like parallel play with a bunch of 3-year-olds. It's just chaotic. Sorry.
So I was asking this question when I was reporting in like Tennessee, rural Tennessee, to a reporter in LA. I'm like, so do you have to pitch? Are your stories given to you? And she's like, yes, sometimes, but when you as a reporter come in with a pitch with a story that's really good that nobody else has, like you're seen as a leader, and they're like, wow, like she did such a good job, like your reputation builds in the newsroom. So I would say like still reach out if you have something, and don't think that like because it's Boston and a lot happens that they're not going to cover you. So I would definitely still reach out and be proactive with those releases. And you can email the assignment desk too, but also maybe a reporter. The assignment editor's inbox might be super full, like thousands of emails, but that reporter isn't getting as many as the main news desk is. You're welcome. Yes.
Cool.
I'm just going to throw out a thank you to Alana, because I'm from Wyoming. I'm Jill from Wyoming. And I'm a senior health policy analyst who got the other duty as assigned to be the PIO in my office. I have no background in journalism. My background's health and law. So I had, with the subsidies going away, we had an insurer pull out of the market at the same time. And I reached out to Alana for help because I didn't know where to start, where to begin, how to put something together. And she did a great job of helping me out. So if you need any help with that, it is a great
Contact
source.
me. Yeah. Thank you, Jill.
And I think she will pay you later. I think that's the agreement that's great. So both ends of the spectrum, from Wyoming to Massachusetts, two very different situations, but there's resources to help.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Again, I'm Alana LaFleur. I'm a communications manager for the NAIC. I'm also the PIO liaison. So anything you need help with, need support, have questions about, you can email me right there.
And I'm Dean Davison, Alana's sidekick. So thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.